Hare Krishna. Welcome, dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we are back here again, celebrating this wonderful book, Bond of Love. I'm sure by now, all of you, most of you have a copy. If you don't, we will be posting a link to either the Amazon or wherever you can purchase this book from. So we are here again, celebrating this beautiful book, Bond of Love, which has wonderful memories and interactions with Srila Prabhupada, shared by over 300 disciples of Srila Vaishnavi disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And today we have here with us Ananda Vrindavanesvari Prabhu. Ananda Vrindavanesvari Prabhu is the temple president for DC. She's been a temple president for 10 years, which is exceptional. And anyone who's a temple president understands how difficult that is. Ananda Vrindavanesvari Prabhu not only is a leading manager, a temple president, but she is also a wonderful writer. One of my favorite blogs to follow is her blog, which you can find on ISKCONofDC.org. Some beautiful, powerful, inspirational writing. So welcome, Ananda Vrindavanesvari Prabhu. Thank you so much for joining us here. And our guest for today is Krishna Rupa Prabhu. Krishna Rupa Prabhu, please accept our humble obeisances, Prabhu.
Please accept mine. Haribol.
Jai. Krishna Rupa Prabhu is joining us from Australia. And Krishna Rupa Prabhu was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1974. And she has been serving the movement in various different capacities. She was sharing how different areas and different services that she's performed over these years. She has served as a pujari, as a seamstress, Radha Madhav, and a pujari for Jagannath Baldev Subhadra in Kolkata Temple. She's a member of the Sabha, which is the Spiritual Advisors Bhagavad Assembly. And she is also the chair for the RRP, which is the Revisions Review Panel, which was set up by the GBC body to review the edits for Srila Prabhupada's books. So we are so very grateful that you both have joined us, and we're really looking forward to hear about Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Jai Krishna Rupa, and Hare Krishna to everybody who has joined us on this call for this wonderful conversation. First of all, Happy New Year to all, and may it be fully blessed with all wonderful Krishna connections in 2021. So, Krishna Rupa, I'd like to start by asking you to just tell us a little bit about the spiritual background of your childhood, and how did you have any concept of God when you were growing up?
Yes, I was actually a little bit of a God bod, I guess you could say. I was raised as a Catholic. The other members of my family at various stages were a little bit less involved, but I was very involved until I was about 13. I used to we had a monastery not very far from where I used to live. And I think from when I was about 11 to 12, I used to go to their very early morning mass, which was about 6:30 a.m. And it was actually a tiny little chapel and lit by candles and with beautiful stained glass windows. And it was a very contemplative mood because they were just brothers and the priests. And, they would allow some outside Catholics to go in. And I used to love going there. And it was really like, I think that's when I felt a really very, very strong connection with God, actually. I had a real feeling that I was communicating with God through prayer. And then when I reached about 13, I asked a local priest some questions about the Vatican rules. He couldn't answer me. So I became very, doubtful about the Catholic religion. And then that's when my questioning period started. But I used to have a little altar in my bedroom as a kid with, the cross and the manger, and used to offer candles to it. So yes, I was a little bit of a god bod. And,
I love that term, god bod. And you certainly, wow, you really had some of those internal and feelings of being drawn to this higher spiritual energy from a small age.
yes.
Tell us a story about how you actually then eventually met the devotees and met Prabhupada. How did you get in touch? How did you connect?
Well, it was quite interesting. Melbourne, I joined in Melbourne at the end of 1972. And the devotees had just opened up a temple, the first temple in Melbourne, in a little Victorian-style house in Burnett Street, St Kilda. And like most young people in those days, the devotees also used to hitchhike because it was a very poor temple. We didn't have vehicles. So a friend of mine picked up one devotee called Ananda hitchhiking, and he invited him to the Sunday love feast. And my friend said, oh, look, I'm not interested in going this, but I know you will, because you're always reading books about Eastern philosophy, so you'll want to go. So I said, oh, yeah, I'd love to go. So that was my first time. I went to my first time at the temple was a Sunday feast.
Wow. And then you kept going back, or that was it? You moved in the next day?
No. When I went, we didn't have deities then, but there were lots of pictures of Mother Yasoda and baby Krishna. So when I first went, I liked the mood and I liked the devotees, of course, but when I saw all the pictures, I was thinking, oh, this is just like Catholicism. That's the Virgin Mary and that's baby Jesus. So I thought, oh, no, that's not for me. And then, excuse me, a couple of months later, another friend of mine became a devotee. So I went around because I thought he was being brainwashed.
Wow.
So then when I went, he said, no, here's a Bhagavad Gita. If you have any respect or any love for me, please read this book. So that's when I really started the journey. So I'd read the Gita, I'd go away, I'd write all my questions down. I'd go back to they had a storefront in the CBD at that stage, and I would go and ask my questions, and then, of course, they were answered very expertly by Madhavisa Swami. And then I'd go away and go, that's good, and I'd go away, read a bit more, write some more questions. And so then I started going to the temple on the weekends, and we were part of what was called the Weekend Ecstasy Crew. We'd go Friday nights, we'd go in Harinam Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday feast, and then one of the devotees would drive us all back to our respective parents' places or whatever. And
so you'd stay over for the weekend. Very cool program. Yeah.
It was very nice. But what was interesting was I actually had no idea I could join, like I could move in. And after a few weeks of this, the devotee, I think he was the treasurer, Chidahari Prabhu, he used to drive us back to our parents' places, etc. He said, oh, but, Carol, I think you could be a devotee. I think you could move in. I went, really? You think I could be a devotee? So that's how I moved into the temple.
Wow. I love that, and what a nice kind of progressive path. So then, in the book A Bond of Love, you described that you moved in right around the time that Prabhupada came.
Yes, yes. I joined probably about a month or 6 weeks before Prabhupada came to install Radha Vallabha, which are the beautiful deities in Melbourne. And that was the first time that I saw Prabhupada.
Yeah, tell
And
me a little bit more about that. He had just arrived from the airport and you were at the temple.
yeah, yes. Well, just as a precursor to that, I started to get a little concerned because, especially in those days, and I wish it was the same now, that especially in those days, every second sentence was Prabhupada said or Prabhupada.
Mm-hmm.
So there was huge focus on Srila Prabhupada, our preeminent Shiksha Guru, our founder Acharya. And I became a little worried that when I meet Prabhupada, and I knew he was coming, when I meet Prabhupada, what if I didn't feel the same way that all the other devotees? And at that visit, they had this wonderful poster with this beautiful photo of Prabhupada in black and white, I think, with this huge garland on. And it has Prabhupada at whose feet all masters sit. So, I was aware that I was going to be meeting this it was going to be a momentous moment to finally see Srila Prabhupada, this person who everyone is talking about all the time. But what if I don't feel the same way?
Yeah, you had a mix of kind of anticipation, but also a little bit of anxiety. This was the moment.
Yes, yes. And what would I do if I didn't feel that? But that first time I saw Prabhupada, that was, it's such a powerful moment. And shall I describe a little bit how I met him?
Yeah,
so,
please.
Of course, in those days, there was no, there were telephones, but no mobiles.
Right.
And calling overseas, of course, wasn't easy. We'd have one phone in an office somewhere that was locked all the time. And so Prabhupada's servants, the way they would communicate with the various temples was by telegram. So often flights would be changed last minute or delayed or come early. So in this particular time, Prabhupada's flight came early. So all the devotees had gone to the airport to meet Prabhupada. And there were just a few devotees left behind, doing the last minute cleaning. And just like Prabhupada said, wherever I go, I smell wet paint.
As Prabhupada said.
Yes, last minute cleaning. So I just had a shower to freshen up, and I was putting on my sari, and I heard that clarion call, Prabhupada is here, Prabhupada is here, which is the sound that all of his disciples were just so, it just did something to your heart, Prabhupada's here. And I went rushing down out of the Brahmacharini room. And the Victorian houses, they always have a staircase that is directly in front of the front door. So when you open the front door, you see directly up the staircase. So I was at the top of the staircase, and Prabhupada the door had just opened, and Prabhupada was standing literally framed in the doorway.
Wow.
That second I saw Prabhupada was like, whoo! And I knew that he was everything that I'd heard about, and I felt that here is my eternal spiritual master. So it was such an amazing experience to actually see Prabhupada in the flesh, so to speak.
Wow. And so at that time he installed Radha Vallabha, and he was at the temple for a number of days?
Yes, he did, but it was all a big blur to me. I just remember that I don't even know where I was during the installation. I don't think I could fit in the temple room. There was smoke billowing out, and my eldest brother had actually built the altar for Radha Vallabha. He's a carpenter, not a devotee, but he did it as a service. So he and my mother had come to see Prabhupada and see the altar. So they were standing out in the corridor, and I think I must have been standing with them. But yeah, all that visit, I remember in that visit that Prabhupada was getting massaged outside in the courtyard, and I remember getting a glimpse of that. I didn't go on any of the morning walks then because I was doing, probably cleaning the brass or something like that. So yeah, that after that first meeting, it was all a bit of a blur.
Yeah, but you must have had just this wonderful feeling. You just, after all your years of praying and being connected, and this moment where you saw Prabhupada.
Oh yes, it was. It was. Krishna does that, when he sees that there's some sincerity in the heart of someone who's wants to learn about spiritual life, wants to develop their love. The scriptures tell us he sends the pure devotee. So there was some little bit of sincerity there, I guess, and but it was all very. I was pretty. Naive and
new.
And very, very new. And we didn't have Bhakta programs or Bhaktin programs. You were pretty much thrown in the deep end. There wasn't much guidance. So I stayed in the temple for about 6 weeks in total. And then we all somehow or other got up to another temple, which was Sydney, where we followed Prabhupada up there. And during that time, I stopped chanting my japa because it was all very kind of crazy, and they'd send us out on selling back to Godheads. And one of the devotee friends and I would sit in the park because we didn't know how to approach people. And then when I got back down to Melbourne Temple, all the ladies had head lice, and I came from a very, even though I was a little hippie, I came from a very kind of Paka background, and that totally freaked me out. And then this friend of mine who had joined, an ex-boyfriend of mine, he had joined and he left. So I was really being pulled by Maya. And I did actually leave, but because that was such a life-changing moment and life-changing, situation, I couldn't go back to what my life was before. So it was a very difficult period. I had been a vegetarian before I was a devotee, and I'd given up intoxication. So I didn't fit in either world. I didn't fit with my old friends and their way of life. And in those days, unfortunately, when you left the temple, you were kind of treated a bit like a leper. You looped.
Looped, yeah.
So my heart was so drawn back to the temple. Not the fact that we didn't have hot water. That wasn't very nice. But I really, really, was caught between a rock and a hard place. And then a friend of mine said, "Look, I'm going to India. Why don't you come with me?" And I'd always wanted to go to India since I was 12 years old and reading books about Buddha, and, it was time to go. So I got a little job and saved up the money, and then we went overland, like we went to Kutupalong to Bali, then we went to Malaysia, then to Calcutta. And all along the way, Krishna was giving me little drops of nectar. Like, books were quite rare. And one traveler in Bali had a Krishna book. And I literally begged him for that Krishna book. I had my beads with me, which I didn't chant on, but I had them with me. And I begged him for that Krishna book. And then when I got to India, we went to Bodh Gaya, which is where Lord Chaitanya had gone to, and Bodh Gaya was where Lord Buddha had, meant to have been
right.
realization. So there was a traveler, and I used to wear a little locket of Krishna around one strand of neck beads. And he went, "Oh, you are Hare Krishna." And I went, oh, well, yeah, yes, I am, kind of. I don't know much about it, but yes, I believe Krishna's God. And he said they're having their first international festival for Gorpanim in Mayapur. And I'd not heard of Mayapur. And he said, I said, oh, I don't know where that is. He said, oh, but they're meeting first in Vrindavan. And then I went, the light switch went on. I know about Vrindavan. That's where Krishna was born. So somehow or other, I made my way. I was by myself at this stage, made my way from Bodh Gaya to Delhi, all night sitting on a third-class train. From Delhi, I got to Mathura. The minute I got to Mathura, I had to get my beads out of my bag. And for the first time in, 9 months, my hand just had to go in the bead bag, which happens in the Holy Dham. And then the first devotee I saw, Krishna Balaram Temple, was just a little pile of bricks. And the first devotee I saw was Satsvarup Maharaj. And I knew very little, but I knew that when you saw a devotee, you're offered obeisances. And I looked like, just I had a long skirt and I had a gamsha wrapped around me like a chadar. And then I offered my obeisances to Satsvarup Maharaj, and he offered his obeisances back. And that's where my real spiritual journey, blossomed again.
That's such a fascinating story. And of course, I think it's worthwhile another discussion, but just the balance between our own personal spiritual inspiration and then sometimes difficulty within the organizational structure and navigating that and helping people navigate that. But was it this year in Janmashtami that you got initiated then, 1974, or was that another time?
That time I'm talking about was beginning of 74. So then
tell about the initiation.
Yeah, so then I went to Mayapur for the Gorpanim, but I ended up living in Calcutta Temple. And I love Calcutta Temple. And Gargamuni Maharaj, then Maharaj, was the TP. He looked after us really nicely. And somehow or other, the Pujari for Jagannath Baladev Subhadra was no longer there. I don't know what happened. So Gargamuni Maharaj wrote to Srila Prabhupada and said, look, we have a nice Australian Bhaktin here. At that stage, I was the only, maybe one of two Australians in ISKCON in Mayapur at that stage. Would you give her first and second initiation together? And Srila Prabhupada very kindly agreed. So I travelled back to Vrindavan, and Prabhupada gave me first and second on Janmashtami in 1974.
Wow. Before you get there, when I moved to India in 1989, even at that time, traveling alone as a Western woman was a bit hairy, but you did a lot of that traveling on your own in the 70s.
I did. And
it was a safer place then?
No, not really. But I just, as a young, innocent girl, totally reliant on Krishna. And in fact, when I arrived I caught the train from Vrindavan to Mayapur that first time. To Calcutta, sorry. And it was late at night, pretty late at night. And it was at, that huge, busy train
station.
And I got a rickshaw. In those days, there were just the running rickshaws, with a man running. And he ran from Howrah to Albert Road. And I didn't really have enough money. I didn't have money, really, to pay him, because it was a long run from there. And I think I had 20 rupees. It really wasn't enough. And I'll never forget his kindness. He just said, don't worry about it.
Wow.
And he didn't do it in like an angry mood, go to hell kind of thing. He just said, it's okay. Okay, tika. And he gave me that free ride.
Wow. I want to jump back to Vrindavan and to your initiation. And were you one of many? And did you have any time with Prabhupada then, or did you go into his room to get Gayatri? I read that in the book. A number of women went in to get Gayatri from Prabhupada.
Yes, yes. There were quite a few devotees being initiated. I can't remember who they were. I think I was the only lady, if I'm correct. Pradyumna told me that I should build the fire jagya. So I went around finding bricks because it was just the foundation, really. You know, I mean, part of the temple was finished by that time, but the opening wasn't happening. And, you know, I built the jagya pit in the temple. Juna told me that if you do that, it's very, very auspicious. And then later on, as I matured in Krishna consciousness, I thought, well, maybe he just didn't feel like doing it himself. But anyway, I did it. And I remember going up to Prabhupada. Unfortunately, there's no photo of me at my initiation, which is, you know, anyone out there, if you ever find a photo of that initiation, please send it to me. There were just no cameras. So I remember getting my beads from Prabhupada and reciting the regulative principles, but I was in a kind of other body experience. It was so incredibly nerve-wracking, I guess you could say. And then we were called in one by one into Prabhupada's quarters, get the Gayatri. So I had memorized the Gayatri. I mean, we got the sheet like the day before, so I was trying to memorize it. I hadn't memorized it by that stage yet, of course, but I was a little familiar with the words. And when I went into Prabhupada's room, my god sister Vishalini had said to her, what should I do? She said, well, offer obeisances and then smile at Prabhupada. Prabhupada really loves it when you smile. So I went into the room, offered obeisances, and then when I got up, I had this, you know, grin from either ear. I don't know what Prabhupada was thinking. And then he said, oh, so you were from Calcutta? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, do any men come into the ladies' quarters?
Interesting.
And the reason he asked that was because if anyone who knows Calcutta Temple knows that the ladies would have to go through the men's bathroom to reach the back stairs, which led up to the room where the ladies lived. And the ladies were Narayani, Madhuri, Tamal Krishna Maharaj's widow, Madhuri, myself, and another American devotee called, I just forget her name at the moment, Samukhi. And occasionally, and the men's suitcases were stored on the roof, so occasionally they'd go up to get their suitcases. So Prabhupada was aware that it wasn't a very good situation for the ladies. And later on, the following year, he actually instructed that the unmarried ladies not stay in Calcutta Temple, and we had to go to Mayapur or Vrindavan. So anyway, I said, no, Prabhupada. And then he beckoned to me, said, come. And I had to go and sit right next to Prabhupada behind, you know, he had a little desk there. I had to go and sit right next to Prabhupada, and I was literally an inch from him. And he held out his hand, the palm of his hand, and then I held my hand out, and then he showed me how to count the Gayatri, and then I repeated the mantras after him. Miraculously, I must have said it correctly because he didn't correct me. But being that close, in such close proximity to Srila Prabhupada, it was, I think I stopped breathing. I think my heart must have been leaping out of my chest. It was just the most amazing, amazing spiritual experience. And then after that, I went around to the front, you know, the desk again, offered my obeisances and thanked Prabhupada. And then I must have written Prabhupada a Vyasa Puja offering, and he wrote me back a letter
Oh,
I'll just read it out quickly, if I may.
yes, please.
My dear, this is Krishna Balaram Mandir, Raman Reti, the 18th of the 8th, 1974. Please accept my dear Krishna Rupa Devi. Please accept my blessings. I beg to thank you for your kind appreciation on the Vyas Puja Day. Your sentiments are appreciated by me. It is stated by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It is only by pleasing the spiritual master, some of the type is gone a bit funny, that one can be assured of pleasing Krishna. So my only request to my disciples all over the world on this day is that they go on pushing on this movement with determination and sincerity, rigidly following the principles I have given you. I hope this meets you in good health. Your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami.
Wow, that's a treasure. Let me then ask you kind of a few questions. And, those of us who didn't meet Prabhupada in person or didn't have the experiences that you had and those precious moments, and yet it's so important for all of us to have a good, strong relationship with Prabhupada as the founder Acharya of our movement. So how, what would be some things that you would encourage us to do to help us really develop a very personal relationship with Prabhupada? How important that is?
Well, it's critical. It's Prabhupada's the linchpin of our whole movement. If we minimize Srila Prabhupada's position, either officially or, individually, it's placing our whole spiritual life and the success of our movement in total jeopardy. In fact, it's calling on destruction, really. Mm-hmm. And, for the success of the movement. And it's so important that we, not just Prabhupada's disciples, but his grand disciples, his great-grand disciples, and going on and on, in the future, that we do develop that relationship with Prabhupada. And how do we do that? Some devotees think, oh, well, Prabhupada's not here, so how can I develop my relationship? But, Srila Prabhupada, because of his position as an emissary of Krishna directly sent Prabhupada to write books and to save the world, really. We can develop that because it's not limited to time and place and circumstance. It's not limited to something that I'm not in the presence of a particular person. Mm. And just like Prabhupada always felt that his spiritual master was always in his heart, he never left. So when we learn about Prabhupada by listening to his disciples, and most importantly, reading Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada said, everything is in my books. So when you actually read Prabhupada's books deeply, you try and study them, and you listen to Prabhupada's conversations and his morning walks, you can actually develop a very close relationship with Prabhupada. And my eldest son said one thing to me once, which to me was like the success of my life. He said, Mom, what did you do? Because, he'd had a child. He said, what did you do that has made me love Prabhupada so much? Which is like, okay, my life is successful now.
Right.
And I said, well, I always talk to you about Prabhupada. We'd read, just as when they were little children, I'd always read from this little red book called Prabhupada Nectar. Mm. And just little passages, paragraphs of Prabhupada's pastimes. And they grew up in that mood that Prabhupada was the center. So they developed that love for Prabhupada. So if you have Prabhupada consciousness by always wanting to hear from Prabhupada and read his books, then you will develop that love for Prabhupada, that relationship. And your own spiritual master he has great love for Srila Prabhupada. So, you know, by serving Prabhupada and by developing that love for Prabhupada, you are actually developing your love for your own spiritual master as well.
Mm, that's a nice point. Thank you. So then for you, there's a question about how has your, while those of us who are of next generation are developing our relationship with Prabhupada and Krishna, and now for you, since Prabhupada has left, in what ways have you felt your relationship deepen, or have you felt that?
Yes, I have to honestly say it has deepened, because when Prabhupada left, I was 24.
Oh, wow. You were young.
Relatively young. I'm 68 now. So, yes, I would have been about 24, because that next year I got married at 25. So I would have been about 24 and a half when Srila Prabhupada left us. And with my maturity in age and my maturity in Krishna consciousness, I feel that my relationship with Prabhupada has actually deepened. And I don't feel, of course, you know, I miss seeing Prabhupada, and I know that, you know, I'd give anything to be able to be there again. And, you know, and often I lament, oh my God, I didn't listen properly when Prabhupada was giving his lectures. You know, I was always overtired or over, you know, because in Mayapur there weren't many devotees, only a few women actually. There were only about 5 or 6 Western women. We had a lot of service to do. And, you know, I just remember constantly feeling tired.
Yeah.
Our diet wasn't very good. We kind of, you know, didn't have a very healthy diet there, because Mayapur was a very poor temple. But I mean, I always appreciated Prabhupada so much, and, you know, the personal service that I was able to render him. But I actually feel like I have a much deeper relationship with him now. And I feel Prabhupada's, you know, when I say I feel Prabhupada's with me all the time, I don't mean to say that I'm some advanced devotee that has, you know, I'm not. I'm a neophyte devotee. I'm a kanista. I always consider myself an aspiring Vaishnava. But I do feel that Prabhupada is with me, and I try and read every day and listen to his lectures every day. And I pray to Prabhupada all the time, because, you know, I feel that it's only through Prabhupada, just like he said in that letter, by pleasing the spiritual master, you please Krishna.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's really a testimony to this sense of, you know, Vani and Vapu, and how, you know, for most of, even so for so many of Prabhupada's disciples, they did not have a lot of personal interaction with him. But that as we stay on the path and as we mature and grow with life experiences as well as spiritual life experiences, that we really can and do become closer to our preceptors and Prabhupada and the whole disciplic succession, really.
Yes, and it's not limited to, you know, you can only have that closeness if you're initiated by Prabhupada. That's a fallacy. You can have that deep, loving relationship with Prabhupada, because Prabhupada will reciprocate. And devotees that I know who are not initiated by Prabhupada, younger devotees, they're very dedicated to this movement. And in fact, the younger generation really inspires me, because I can see their devotion to Prabhupada. I can see that, you know, to them, Prabhupada is the center, and we have to do everything we possibly can to encourage that and fan that devotion.
Yeah, you tell this really sweet story about how you wanted a little reciprocation from Prabhupada. And then you wanted to hear something, so you made him this beautiful bead bag, right? This embroidered bead bag. I thought that was very sweet, because that's just that we want to be unconditional and selfless, but reciprocation is so important. And when you just said that, and it's like Satsrup Maharaj and Prabhupada says, well, if you love me, I love you. And the generosity of that statement, and the fact that, Prabhupada really is that just huge anchor for all of us.
Yeah, and Prabhupada knows our hearts. I mean, it wasn't a bead bag I made Prabhupada. It was a little cartel
bag. Yeah, right. I'm looking at it.
Do you have time for me to tell that story? Because it's pretty funny.
Yes, please. We love Prabhupada stories.
So I went, because I used to clean Prabhupada's quarters when he was there and when he wasn't there. That was one of my services. And I had seen this beautiful cartel bag made by someone, I don't know who, but it was very expertly embroidered, a bag of the 6 Goswamis. Beautiful. And I thought, wow, that is so amazing. I want to make something good for Prabhupada. So I'd go into the sewing room a little earlier, and I had just started to learn a bit of Jari. Devi Shakti had learnt Jari, and she was teaching me. So I was making this kind of pretty rubbish cartel cover, bag. And Shruti Rupa was, cooking for Prabhupada sometimes. And Shruti Rupa was, quite bold. She was a very self-confident lady and, wasn't afraid to speak to Prabhupada, whereas I was absolutely, terrified. So I said to Shruti Rupa, can you give this to Prabhupada for me? And she said, no, I'm not going to give it to him. You give it to him. I said, no, I can't do it. Let's do it together. And Prabhupada, this might have been 76, and Prabhupada was a little unwell. So he wasn't going on morning walks, and he was sitting on the other side of the corridor in Mayapur. And, she kind of dragged me around, and I was hiding behind her. So she was walking up to Prabhupada, and I was walking behind her. And I had this whole plan in my head, like I had the movie all set out. She would give Prabhupada the cartel cover, bag, and then he would say, oh, this is very nice. Who has made this? And then I would stick my head out, and she'd go, Krishna Rupa, and I'd stick my head out, and then Prabhupada would go, oh, thank you very much, very nice. And then that was going to happen in my head. So then she hands the thing to Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada picked it up like it was a dead rat or something. Not that Prabhupada would touch a dead rat, but he picked it up like this and looked at Shruti Rupa and said, what is this? And meanwhile, I am in my heart laughing my head off, because and I'm in my heart, I'm going, oh, Prabhupada, you knew my mind, because I wanted praise, I wanted this. But that lesson was a lesson that really, I kept with me my whole life. That Prabhupada knows what you're up to. He knows what your hidden agenda is. And many, when you listen to Prabhupada memories, many devotees will talk about that. But there's another good thing that that wasn't a bad thing. It was a wonderful lesson to me. But at one point, Hari Sori, who was Prabhupada's servant then, gave me a little bit of silk to make a handkerchief for Prabhupada, because he had a bit of a sniffle. I mean, I don't know how silk would work for, some with a bit of a sniffle. But anyway, I got the handkerchief. It was a tiny little scrap of silk. I still have it, actually. And I didn't sew it very well. I didn't sew it by hand. I was an absolute nonsense, not doing a really nice job. And then when Prabhupada was leaving to go on with his travels, Hari Sori gave it back to me. And I kept it for all these decades. And then, maybe 7 years ago, Hari Sori came to New Govardhan. And I said to Hari Sori, I said, look, I know you will not remember this, but do you remember that little orange silk handkerchief? And he goes, oh, yeah, I remember that. I went, did Prabhupada ever use it? He went, oh, yes, Prabhupada used it. Prabhupada loved that handkerchief. And I said, what? It's such a shocking job. It's terrible. And he told me this story. He said that he went into Prabhupada's quarters in Mayapur, and there were a group of sannyasis there. And one sannyasi, I won't mention who it was, but one sannyasi was saying to Prabhupada what a great sannyasi, good sannyasi he was. Oh, I don't look at women, Prabhupada, I don't talk to women, etc., etc. And Prabhupada's just sitting there. And Prabhupada would often do that. He would more or less give you a rope to hang yourself. You know that saying, give a dog a rope long enough, he'll hang himself. Right. So, often he'd let you run on. And there's been many incidences of that. And then at that juncture, Hari Sori took the opportunity to give Prabhupada this handkerchief, a terrible handkerchief. And Hari Sori said Prabhupada beamed ear to ear. And he held up the handkerchief and he said, and I will always accept the service from my female disciples, from my female daughters.
Wow.
So that kind of really nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So really powerful. So we have questions coming in, but I just want to say, and I'll there's so many things. Before we came on together, Krishna Rupa was saying, well, if we finish early, and I don't think we're going to finish early. But what I particularly love about the bond of love is that we hear stories we've never heard before. We've heard all the stories from all the really well-known devotees, but it's full of these beautiful, just sweet moments with Prabhupada that are so nourishing. At least I find it so nourishing. And just like the handkerchief story, who has ever heard of these stories? So not only is the book powerful, but ways that we can hear these stories from, especially all the devotees, and especially Prabhupada's women devotees, is really a wonderful thing. Helps us really appreciate Prabhupada more and more. So thank you for that. Okay, so earlier in your story, I'll switch to a few questions, and then I'll get back to some of the ones I have on my list. But earlier, you mentioned how you left for a little while and you didn't chant for a little while. And so the question here is, how can we overcome guilt and weakness for breaking our vows and struggling with the material onslaught, ... the war of the senses? So how do we overcome that?
So I always think of this phrase, hate the sin, not the sinner. So guilt is valuable when it helps you rectify. If you just feel guilt about something, and during that period of time when I'd only lived in the temple such a short time, so it wasn't really so much. I wasn't initiated. I was just basically a friend of Krishna and had to stay in the temple. But I took it very, very seriously, notwithstanding. And that 8 months or 9 months when I was out of the Association of Devotees was a terrible time for me. I felt very, like I said before, it was like a limbo. I fit in neither world. It was terrible. But I think that I knew that the life of a devotee was the right life to live, and I had a weakness of not being able to having an attachment to this boy who had left, and of course, and Krishna is so kind. I have to tell you, when I left and that boy picked me up and we went to stay in the country, the 2 days after we had left, this boy said to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I've got to go back to Melbourne. I've got a toothache. I've got to go to the dentist." And I said, "Okay, I'll see you in a couple of days." And he never came back. So
Like you make an effort, and even if you fail, Krishna helps you out.
absolutely. And like I was saying, all the way along in my traveling, Krishna would drop these little breadcrumbs to me, these spiritual breadcrumbs. So anyone who has left, who has, felt some issues with the senses and they're strong, don't give up. Don't hate yourself. Just work towards improving. And the best way to do that is by devotee association. So now in our wonderful society, if a devotee has had some fall down, some weakness, he's left for a little while, then when he visits the temple, the devotees are very encouraging. They're very happy to see them.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid. Just, whatever connection you can have, then have it. And that will give you spiritual strength to again pick up the fight. We've been going through transmigrating for millions and millions and millions and millions of births. So it's not easy, the battle of Maya, with Maya. And when we become devotees, Maya, we are declaring war on Maya. And her job, she does it very efficiently, her job is to keep us here. So we have to just be sincere, and every day we have a bad day one day, the next day is a new day, and just pick it up, put your hands in your bead bag, read a verse of Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, associate with devotees, and just do your best, and you'll get stronger.
Thank you. That's beautiful. There's a question about as a younger generation. What's one instruction you would give to us to contribute to the future of the movement, and especially young female devotees? And based on your experience with Prabhupada, or maybe, what instruction would you say would be really good for next generation young ladies?
Well, if you do some research, you'll find that Srila Prabhupada was incredibly supportive of his female disciples, incredibly supportive. There's, many instances. For example, in Calcutta Temple, it was the year before I was there, but and you can find this in Prabhupada Memories, and I can't remember the number of it, but you can find it. And they went on a morning walk with Prabhupada in Calcutta, and one brahmachari did nothing but complain to Prabhupada about the women. Oh, Prabhupada, they're not covering their heads, they're in the way, they're distracting, why should they live there, etc., etc. Prabhupada didn't say anything. He just went on with the morning walk. And then when he got back to the temple, they knocked on the door because it had been locked, until the deities were open. And I think there was Palika, Kaushalya, not sure if Yamuna was there, but there were, 4 or 5 Prabhupada's female disciples there. And they opened the door and they immediately offered their obeisance to Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada turned to this brahmachari and said, we've been on the walk, these devotees, they've dressed the deities, they've done the cooking, they've prepared the temple for, the guests. And he said, and if you offer your obeisances to these women, you will become liberated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And other occasions, Prabhupada said these women are angels. So Prabhupada supported the women very, very strongly. So, I think that if you focus on that and how Prabhupada cared, Palika had a torn sari and he was very upset that she was, had a torn sari. He actually gave the money himself so that she could buy a new sari. And one time in Mayapur, Prabhupada was 2 months in Mayapur, in I think the beginning of 77. He wasn't well, so every day we would have darshan with him from 4:30 to 7 p.m. And I had my one spot that I always sat in. I always made sure I was there. But this one day I was running late, and I came running towards the door, and it was full. And Prabhupada could tell from the look on my face how devastated I was. And he noticed that, and he signaled me to run around the other side to the other door, because there are two entrances. And then Prabhupada said to the devotees like this, move, move. And he made a space for me to sit. You know, I was just an insignificant brahmacharini, you know, doing nothing grand. And Prabhupada noticed that. And there's so many incidences. And Prabhupada always said, if you think you're a woman, then you are less intelligent. We have to be on the spiritual platform. And if devotees try to make us not act on that spiritual platform, we have to be strong. So if you have, and I always try and encourage younger women in this way, if you have a skill that you can use in Krishna's service, then it's your birthright to be able to use it. But it's not that you want to be ambitious or push yourself forward. No, you want to be able to serve. And just like Ananda Vrindavan is such a wonderful example of this, my interviewer, that she's been the TP for 10 years. And she's in a female body. So, you know, there's no restrictions. The only restrictions are really what we impose on ourselves. But we, you know, at the same time, we don't want to be bolshy about it. We just want to be humble, and Krishna will send us the service. We just have to want it. And there's a big difference between what respect looks like and what equity looks like. So someone may respect your opinion, but are they allowing you to give that opinion? And it's a matter of being a little experienced and seek out a role model. Seek out, you know, an older Vaishnavi who you can resonate with, and you ask their advice. And there's so many wonderful women in this movement that will help you give inspiration or get inspiration.
That is really helpful. And I think I would just add to that. It seems like in this book, A Bond of Love, you've written maybe a page. I'm wondering if you're thinking of writing down some more of your experiences with Prabhupada or speaking them. It seems to me it's so powerful when we and next generation can actually, we have to actually read these things. We have to learn how Prabhupada dealt with all his disciples, and not just his women disciples, but who Prabhupada was as a person, so that we can actually have that mood. And we can actually then say that, speak to that, if we see things that are not being done nicely in temples. We can say, well, wait a minute, this wasn't the way Prabhupada did it. So I think it's really important to educate ourselves on that as well.
Yes. I mean, interestingly enough, when I did join Melbourne Temple, I wasn't allowed to drive because I was a woman and therefore less intelligent. Which I often tell this story. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But I just thought, yeah, I mean, I was a bit of a feminist in those days, I guess you could say. And I went, oh, well, whatever, you know, I think that's nonsense, but I want to be a devotee. So if that's what you think, that's fine, as long as you're not stopping me from
Right.
you know, doing my service or living in the temple. So, you know, over the years, there's been kind of ridiculous things like Balavanta talks about when the GBC passed this resolution. They actually passed the resolution that any single mother, you know, a woman with children, either her husband had left or whatever, could not stay in our temples because they were a financial burden. They couldn't do the service, they couldn't go on Sankirtan, and the temple had to give them money to support their babies or little children. So they actually passed this resolution for women to leave, you know, the women in that category. And Balavanta talks about this. And when he took the resolution book, because Prabhupada didn't attend the GBC meetings, but they would write all the resolutions in a book. It was pre-computer era. and they would take the resolutions to Prabhupada for him to ratify. So when they got to that, Prabhupada was like, forget it. There's no way. He said, I want everyone to be Krishna conscious, whether they're women, men, single mothers, not single mothers, and they immediately had to dash that resolution out.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons why when I was asked to be on the Sabha, I was very grateful to be able to do that, because the Sabha is the check and balance with the GBC. So any GBC resolution comes to the Sabha and we review it. And if we don't agree, or we think there might need to be some amendments, we can go back and the GBC will listen to us. And it was solely for that reason, because I'd heard about that resolution, that I thought, yes, I have to do this.
One of my, we're out of time, and I'll hand it back to Govinda Priya in a second. But one of the questions I had wanted to ask you was like, do you think we've come a long way since those early days? And I think we have, after hearing some of the things you've said.
Oh, definitely. I definitely agree with you. We have, okay, not many female GBCs, but we have female GBCs. We have female deputy GBCs. We have so many wonderful leaders who are in women's bodies, and also so many young women who are really, when we have the International Vaishnavi Ministry meetings, and I listen to these young women and what they're doing, like Govinda Priya, like Gita Amrita, like Madhavi in the UK, so many names. I can't mention them all, and how amazing they are, and how so much more capable than not just among women, but among men. They're fantastic. And I just want to end on one point. My God Sister Rukmini told me this. And because I had this seminar called The Importance of Women in ISKCON, right? So this year in Mayapur, I showed that presentation to some of the Sabha members, and Rukmini was my God sister, who's also on the Sabha, and she gave me some interesting added stories for that. And she was saying that there's a very well-known neuroscientist, a lady, and she actually, in her research, she explained that even though the female brain may be smaller than a male brain because of body size and whatever, the same brain cells are there. They are just packed in. And she uses the term just like a corset. So it's packed in. I like that analogy. And they're packed in. So it's very important that we as women in the movement don't think less of ourselves, because Prabhupada didn't. He wanted us to preach. He wanted us to expand the movement. And when Rukmini was a young 16-year-old girl, and Prabhupada said, I want you all to go and start new temples, and Rukmini puts up a hand as a 16-year-old and says, oh, Prabhupada, the girls too? And Prabhupada said, yes. So Prabhupada wanted us to be preachers. He wanted us to spread the word of Krishna.
Wonderful. And just a nice sweet note to that, today is Rukmini's birthday.
Oh, Jai, Rukmini Dasi.
Oh, yeah. She's just up there with one of, all of you wonderful Prabhupada women disciples who have done so much for all of us and continue to do so much for all of us, and that it's just an honor and a treasure and a great privilege to hear from you. And I hope we can do it again. Because
yes,
I think only start.
As I said, I've
got
2 pages of things that I've only touched on about 3 of them.
I know.
Like I said to you earlier, once you start talking about Prabhupada, it's so hard to stop. Yeah. And thank you so much for this incredible privilege to, be part of this wonderful initiative, and I'm really, really grateful. Thank you so much, Jai.
Thank you so much, Krishna Rupa Prabhu. I hope you were reading all the comments, and there was so much appreciation for your wisdom, for the wonderful stories. This really, like Ananda Vrindavanesvari Prabhu was mentioning, that this really, gives us an insight into how Srila Prabhupada actually interacted, and so many practical things. It's so wonderful. The book, your personal, and please continue to write.
Yeah.
And, we will publish it. And, we want this to reach as many devotees as possible. So thank you very much. Thank you, Krishna Rupa Prabhu. Thank you so much, Ananda Vrindavanesvari Prabhu. And a very, very happy birthday to Rukmini Prabhu. From all of us.
Rukmini is one of my heroine and role model.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So on this note, I want to express our gratitude to all our viewers for your active participation and for today. So this is just the beginning. We are trying to invite as many as possibly we can. So many when I was going through the list of devotees that have contributed to the book, so many Prabhupada disciples have already left us. And we're just thinking, I was just reflecting, how nice it would have been if we would have been able to do this. But anyway, it's not late. We want to continue to do this, continue to hear these wonderful stories, and please continue to support the affairs of the Vaishnavi Ministry. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us, Krishna Rupa Prabhu. Thank you so much for joining us. Hare Krishna.
Vande